Hey, welcome in. Well, here's the headline. Mikhaila Peterson doubles down. Publisher should fire crying adults and can't run a business when you're being manipulated. This is what happens when you hire children to work at your business. They may look like adults, but they're not. They're emotionally and intellectually stunted, probably from going to college. That's probably what did it to them. Anyway, what's this all about? Well, at Penguin Random House, they have a bunch of adult employees who are apparently openly crying because they're publishing Jordan Peterson's next book. And apparently this is just a bit too much for them to handle because they, of course, none of them have ever read any of his stuff or know anything about them. They've just heard he's a bad man. Anyway, so Professor Jordan Peterson's daughter dropped some additional thoughts Wednesday after Vice News reported that staff members at Penguin Random House Canada, which has contracted with Peterson for the new book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, were openly complaining and crying about publishing her father's forthcoming book. Mikhaila Peterson revealed that Penguin Random House Canada has long supported her father and slammed the idea of employees who would cry at the thought of publishing Peterson's forthcoming book as ideologically possessed, which is what they are. And what they're in is a cult. It's a woke cult. It's part doomsday, ecological, environmental doomsday. It's part, crackpot racial theories. And then just a whole big helping of Marxism. And you know that you're doing it right when you're catastrophizing everything. Anyway, says here, quote, "We're now dealing with bullies who are trying to cancel books." This is a publishing house, okay? A publishing house. They're trying to cancel books at a publishing house. The people who work there want to burn books, essentially. Anyway, they're trying to cancel books that they haven't read by employing methods used by children below the age of 6, crying. Those are the people that will eventually be in charge of what's published and available. It's terrifying, tweeted Mikhaila Peterson. Yes, that is terrifying. And, keep in mind, they're not talking about banning, Mein Kampf, although that in itself would be a bad idea. The whole thing about remembering history, right? How it's probably a good idea to remember history, right? But it's not even like that. It's just, this is basically a self-help book. It's helping people get control of their lives and being responsible to themselves and the people around them and being a useful human being. Although I guess the thought of being a useful human being would be kind of terrifying to a woke person, but, whatever. Anyway, Peterson also said that she stood by the suggestion that employees who cried about the book getting published should be fired. And I agree with that statement 100%. A remark she originally shared as 2 rules for business, a nod to her father's 12 rules for life. What did she say? Quote, "How do you run a business when you're being manipulated, bullied, and pressured by people who work there to cancel books they haven't read? If those people end up in charge, Penguin will be just a propaganda manufacturer in no time," which is precisely what they want. And they're certainly willing to cry in public to get it. Anyway, what else does she say here? She says, "I'm appalled that the good people at Penguin, who have been supportive of Jordan Peterson for years, were harassed by their ideologically possessed colleagues. Having to stand up to a bunch of crying adults must have been terribly stressful. Good for them." Yeah, it's weird and very distressing to see adults behave that way. Because, with a kid, you recognize that, they have to have some guidance, and this is a part of the growing up, basically. It's getting past, like irrational tantrums and that sort of thing. But when you've got an adult that's doing it, it's kind of too late. That person is already kind of crossed over into a realm of irrationality and narcissism that they may never be cured of. Just going to interrupt for 1 second to say, if you like this content, subscribe so you can see more. Thanks a lot. And anyway, Vice News reported earlier this week that Penguin Random House Canada hosted a town hall-style meeting for staff members to express their concerns about the book. And people started crying about how Jordan Peterson has affected their lives, which is not at all in reality. Unless they, read one of his books or have paid attention to him, in which case he would have positively affected their lives by making them more responsible and more useful and less likely to cry in public because somebody that they know nothing about is publishing a book. But this fact that they haven't read his stuff, and they can't possibly have to be this opposed to him, to be this frightened by him, they can't possibly know anything about him. But that's kind of the point, right? There's a circular logic that goes on amongst the woke in which, this book is bad. Well, how do you know it's bad? Well, it was written by this bad man. Well, how do you know he's a bad man? Well, because he wrote this bad book. And just on and on and on. And within the cult, it's kind of like a mortal sin to actually investigate this or read anything because it's a lapse of faith. I mean, you have to take it just on faith that the witch is a witch. And by questioning that, you become suspect yourself. In short, it doesn't pay to actually look at anything that he's done or anything that he's written because it might make you question the orthodoxy of the woke cult. And then, it's time to find new friends, right? So it really doesn't pay. At least not for weak people, right? It ends off with, furthermore, the publishing house's Diversity and Inclusion Committee has also received a minimum of 70 responses from employees about the 12 Rules sequel, according to an employee at Penguin. Only 2 of those messages were in support of the book. What is the point of having a Diversity and Inclusion Committee if this is the result? You have 70 responses, 68 of them unsupportive of publishing what is essentially a self-help book, that people want to read. People have a reason they want to read it. There's obviously a need in the market for it. And again, this is a publishing house. They're supposed to publish books, right? So what is the purpose of this? It seems to be counterproductive to have these diversity and inclusion committees if the product of them is just irrationality and people crying in public because they have to do their job and because some other people in the world disagree with them. Anyway, again, only 2 out of 70 messages being supportive of publishing the book at a publishing house, that's not a good sign. That's very, very sad, in fact. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Please subscribe, like, and share. That really helps me out. If you'd just like to listen, there's the podcast Radio Baloney. It's on pretty much every platform, including Spotify. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next time.